Hi guys, yeah, at long last I can do this video that I mentioned a while ago, and what we're going to do is look at these three colorimeter monitor profilers: the i1 Display Pro, the Spyder 5, which is a very popular one, and God knows how many thousands of these are in circulation, and the new Spyder X. And the reason this is taken so long to make is that when I was first approached to do it, I said that I was only going to do it if I could compare all three colorimeters or all three tools on a level playing field. Because, yeah, everybody does reviews of these things, and the only thing is they test each colorimeter on its own software. And the thing is that every tool has its own little foibles, and software can do things with those foibles. And so, in a nutshell, you can't really, in all fairness, compare all three tools if they've all been worked up with dedicated software. So what I was going to do was, and what I have done, is test all three with Eizo's Colornavigator 7. And the reason it's taken so long is that Colornavigator 7 was not compatible with this baby, the Spyder X Pro. But I think it was yesterday or sometime over the weekend, the latest version of Colornavigator 7 was released by Eizo, and it was compatible. I actually dislike Colornavigator 7. I'm much happier using Colornavigator 6, but Colornavigator 6 doesn't have the compatibility with the Spyder X Pro. And so, anyway, here we go. So, I did a video, I'll put a link to it up there somewhere, and a while ago, on how I calibrated my monitor, this Eizo CS270, using Colornavigator 6. And I know one or two people got a little bit of consternation going about why I use grey balance, but you know, I mean, it is what it is. This is the way I work. So what I've decided to do is to do three new complete profiles of this monitor using each one of the tools, and they're all set up to produce a profile that is the same. In other words, as we can see here, with a target brightness of 100 candelas per square meter, I'm leaving the system and the tool to work out the minimum black level. We're working with a white point of 6500 Kelvin, or D65. We're working with a gamma of 2.2 with a priority grey balance using the native gamut or colour space of the monitor. Now bear in mind that this setup of mine is a little bit harder on a profiling tool like this, for the simple reason that I'm using a monitor with an inbuilt colour lookup table. Therefore, I am calibrating the monitor, not what a lot of you guys do, which is calibrate the graphics card inside your machine. Because the graphics card, oh dear, how can I put this? A graphics card is incapable of wrangling the colours or controlling the colours, which the likes of Lightroom or Photoshop derive from your images. A graphics card is an output device, and so when you what they call software calibrate, in other words, you calibrate your graphics card on your machine, you're sort of asking the graphics card to do something it wasn't really designed to do. So fundamentally, all that happens in my machine is the colours get sent out by either Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever other piece of software or application I'm using. They get sent into the monitor, and the monitor itself decides what colours go where, because it's hardware calibrated. And the other thing about this system, why it's a little bit hard on the machines or the tools, the calibrators, is if I go into my system report and I go to graphics displays, you can see that I'm working in 30-bit colour, or well, ostensibly 10-bit colour, whereas I suspect that a lot of you guys are still working on 8-bit colour. But anyway, that's beside the point, and there is an article on my blog from quite a while back on the benefits of 10-bit colour versus 8-bit colour, and if I remember, I'll put a link to that in here as well somewhere. But anyway, let's just shut that lot down. And as I said, I've used Colornavigator 7 because it accepts all three of these individual calibration tools, the i1 Display Pro, and both the older version of the Spyder, the Spyder 5 Pro from Datacolor, and Datacolor's new Spyder X Pro. Now, in the video that I mentioned beforehand, where I show you how I calibrate, I actually went on to talk about profile validation, and specifically the Delta E2000 variations between what's in the profile for real and what it should be. Okay, so what we have here on the screen now are three validation reports. On the left, we've got the validation report for the i1 display. That's this baby. In the middle, we've got the new Spyder X Pro validation report. And on the right, we've got the validation report for the Spyder 5. And so, well, let's go and have a look at them. Now, as you can see, first of all, the i1 Display Pro was told to profile this monitor for 100 candelas per square metre, and the result that it came up with was 100.3 candelas per square metre. The Spyder X similarly came up with 100.4 candelas per square metre, as did the old Spyder 5. So no difference there. The black levels from the i1 display, 0.21 of a candela per square metre. The Spyder X a little bit darker, 0.16 candelas per square metre, and the Spyder 5, 0.2 candelas per square metre. Colour temperature was they were told, all three of them were instructed to calibrate for 6500K or D65 for the white point, and the Spyder 5 came up with 6498. The Spyder X came up with 6492, and the i1 display came up with 6491. Now then, the other thing is this. The contrast ratio, because I didn't specify the black point and I just let the system work it out with the tool for itself, the contrast ratio for the i1 display, 456 to 1. The contrast ratio for the Spyder 5, 444 to 1. So a little bit lower in contrast. The Spyder X, 619 to 1. Now, it all depends whose website you look at, and there is always a problem, as I keep saying. There's always a lot of crap on the internet, and you'll see all sorts of junk talked about contrast ratios for photography, and Oh yeah, I've come across sites where they suggest you work at 800 or 1,000 to 1. It's absolutely bloody ridiculous, because as you've seen me demonstrate when I'm using the likes of Lightroom, if I take contrast out of an image, the shadows open up and I see more midtones. So you've always got to remember that if you were going to print, which I try and encourage everybody I know to actually do, because it is the final part of the photographic process, and not enough people do it anymore, whereas traditionally everybody who was a photographer printed. But the thing is, if you want to do a print, the highest contrast print paper that you can print to is a high gloss. And on average, a high gloss inkjet paper is only going to give you a contrast ratio of somewhere between 300 and, if you're lucky, 400 to 1. So the thing is, if you process your images in too high a contrast, on too high a contrast monitor, you won't get an accurate representation of the contrast that you have available to you in a print. So you really and truly don't want super high contrast ratios on your monitor calibration. You don't want your monitor to look super contrasty. And so there you go. But the fundamental thing about this test was to get a direct comparison of the Delta E 2000 variations for each of the 3 colour calibration tools that I've tested here. And we just want to see how accurate they really are. So that's why they've all been done on a level playing field. They've all been done with the same piece of software, the dedicated software for the inbuilt colour lookup table on this particular Eizo monitor. And so if I scroll all the way down to the very bottom of these 3 reports, rather like that, now we can see the actual average, maximum and the white point variations. Delta E 2000 is this centre column here, and on the old i1 Display Pro, the average Delta E 2000 variation is 0.39, the maximum deviation was 1.44, and the white point was only 0.04 out. On the old Spyder 5, this is where things get a little bit hairy, and this is why I hated with a passion the original Spyder calibrators. I didn't like the little Triumph 3-pointed thing, and I didn't like the Spyder 5 either. Typical colorimeter, the average deviation is 0.46. The white point deviation is 0.38, but look at this, the maximum deviation, or maximum Delta E 2000 error, is 4.2. Now, as I said in that aforementioned video a while ago, I always like to have a Delta E variation of less than 1, and really and truly, I never want to see a Delta E variation above 2. In fact, I don't want to see 2. I don't. Having said that, it's not really something you need to worry about. But 4.2? Now if we look at the new Spyder X, we can see the average deviation is 0.4, which is slightly higher than the i1 Pro, but a lot less than the old Spyder 5, which it replaces. The maximum deviation is 2.39, which is a little bit too much for me. You know, it's nearly well, it's nearly half, isn't it, of the old Spyder 5, so it is an absolute improvement over the old Spyder 5, and the white point variation is 0.28. But you'll notice that white variation is still a lot larger than the Delta E2000 white variation on the i1 display. So really and truly, if I was going to pick one of these three colorimeters to use for profiling my monitor, guess which one it'd be? Yes, it will be this one on the left, which is this one. Yes, and I am not, I hasten to add, on a commission. There's no affiliate links in this. I'm not being paid to do this review, which isn't really a review. It's just some sort of public information which I'm putting out there. What does all this mean really in real world terms? Well, if I go over to the old interweb, come here, there we go, and I bring up the front page of my website, which really does need to be redone, and I pull up Colornavigator. Come on, there we go. So we can see that you're using the monitor calibration from my Colour Monkey, which is up there somewhere. But a Colour Monkey is a colour spectrophotometer, and it's a little bit more complex. And I'm not going to sit here and espouse the reasons why a spectrophotometer is better than a colorimeter, because there's lots of articles on the old interweb which will tell you the reasons why. It's all to do with the construction and the number of lenses and the number of filters that they use. But I must admit that the Spyder X it's very good for a colorimeter, but it's not as good as the i12. The i1 Display Pro. It's not as good, and fundamentally they are the same sort of thing. They are just a single lens colorimeter, and they do a very good job. All three of them do a good job, but what does it mean in real world terms? So as I said, I am looking at this display here using my Colour Monkey profile. Now if I switch out to the i1 Display Pro, you aren't, oh dear, I don't quite know if video compression is going to allow you to see this. I very much doubt it. And you also have to remember that I'm looking at this in quite a large colour space, whereas you will be viewing this in a colour space that's something between ROC 700 and whatever it is. It's 705 or 709 and sRGB. So you probably aren't going to see what happens here when I flick between them. But if I flick over to the i1 display, it's very, very little has changed on this shot of this Kestrel here. Possibly one of my most famous and best-selling shots, this is. And anyway, well, that's beside the point. If I slip over to the Spyder X, you'll notice things just got a little bit brighter if I go from the i1 display to the Spyder X. Things get just a little bit brighter, and that's because of this contrast ratio of 619 to 1. But it's still good for colour. However, if I go back over to the old Spyder 5, it's come back down to pretty much the right ballpark in terms of luminosity and brightness, but now it's got a magenta cast over it because these greens have gone very muddy and a little bit on the reddish side. So that's why I don't like the Spyder 5. But the i1 display, very neutral, got a nice contrast ratio, which means that if you're working up an image in RAW or a big 16-bit TIFF in Photoshop or Lightroom, and you actually want to go and print this, you are going to have a more subtle contrast ratio or contrast range in your image, which you're going to find easier to fit onto your print paper, so it takes less effort when you're soft proofing. So anyway, there we go. Now, just to give you one final little sort of illustration, if I fire up Colornavigator, not Colornavigator, Max Color Utility, or Color Sync Utility I should say, not Colornavigator on the brain. So if I look at the colour space provided by the new Spyder X, make it a little bit bigger, hold down the Alt key, click and push, make it a little bit smaller so you can see. So that is the colour space for this monitor, or the 3D representation of the colour profile created by the Spyder X Pro. And I'm just going to hold that for comparison, and then we can compare that to the old Spyder 5. And you can see the old Spyder 5, which is the solid colour, and the Spyder X, which is the white wireframe. They are pretty much of a muchness, but you can see that the old Spyder 5 does actually create a slightly larger colour space in respect of the greens and in respect of the yellows, and it's pretty much akin in the blues, but it's a little bit smaller in the magenta to red end, so it's a little bit deficient in colour that way. But of course we all know it's got a slight colour shift, which is what you can see fundamentally here in the difference between these two colour spaces. If we go over to compare it now to the i1 display, now you can see the i1 display is a little bit more prevalent in the amount of reddish or dark orange colours that it contains in the profile, but fundamentally it's a little bit smaller all round. So, you know, I mean, it's as long as it is short, or as long as it is broad. You know, I mean, you might think that looks a bit of a large difference. It isn't, because if I go and compare this to the Adobe RGB colour space, now you can see how small the Adobe RGB colour space is in comparison to the colour space created for the monitor by all three of those individual colour profiling tools. So there you go. And I suppose in reality, this talk of colour spaces will bring me nicely around to the subject of my next video, which I've had a bit of a request for, where I go and talk about colour spaces, camera colour spaces, and our three imaging colour spaces. Adobe RGB 1998, which is my opinion should be scrapped, sRGB, which we've all got to work with, and ProPhoto RGB, yes. Anyway, so that's going to be the subject of the next video. Hope you found this video useful. If you're in the market for a new screen calibrator and you don't want to spend the money on a colorimeter, I'll start again. If you don't want to spend the money required for a spectrophotometer, buy one of those. Good value for money and more accurate. If you don't want one of those, if you're a Datacolor fanatic, don't buy one of those. Or if you've got one of those, go out and buy one of them instead. I will add a caveat to that. I've not tried the software, obviously, for either of these two products, because I don't want that software anywhere near my system, because I have a very precise colour management setup on my machine and I don't want to bugger it up. And really and truly, using the software for this I know what the software for this is like because I know what the software's like for its big brother. The I12, whatever it is, the big thing that costs about 1,500 quid. But anyway, there you go. Hope you found that useful, guys. That would be my recommendation on the basis of the even playing field test that I've just done here. So until the next time, guys, have a good time, stay safe, keep taking the pictures, and I shall see you very soon. Tooroo.